Greetings and welcome to New Planet School. Today we're going to talk about deliberate practice, which is a set of strategies to help you get to be really good at things. But first, before we get started, I want to ask you a few questions just to get you thinking about a few things. The first question I want you to think about is, are there a few things that you'd like to be better at? Think about that for a minute and itemize those in your mind. What would you like to be good at? Second question is for some of these things, does it feel like you have no talent for these things? Like if you wanted to get to be pretty good at these, it might actually be fairly difficult. And last question, do you think that your skill level for these things is due to nature? That is, you're born with these talents. If you don't have them, then it's too bad. Or that it's really nurture that matters, who your coaches are and how much you practice and so forth. What are your thoughts on that? Think about these questions for a minute. And think also about some of the most talented people that you know of. Think about musicians like Yo-Yo Ma, theoretical physicists like Albert Einstein, novelists like Ernest Hemingway, athletes like Michael Jordan. These are people that are incredibly talented, aren't they? But science has some tips for you to help you become very talented as well. And that's what this video is about. I'll give you a quick preview here just so you can see what the basic ideas are. And what science actually shows is that what your skill level is in these things that you'd like to be good at is determined by both nature and nurture. It's not one or the other, it's some mixture, and it greatly depends on you and what you'd like to do, which one plays the largest role. The second thing that science shows is that you need a great deal of discipline, because the most important thing that you can do is practice, practice, and practice. There's really no other way. And experiments have been done observing people that become experts, and that is in fact how they do it. But it's not that you practice, it's how you practice. Practice alone is not enough. What you really need to do when you practice is focus on your weaknesses and place a priority on thinking about what those are and removing those weaknesses. It's how you practice, not how much you practice. And finally, feedback is crucial. You need to have a coach or some way of measuring, some metric for measuring your progress so that you can watch it happen, and if it's not happening, you can go back and change it. And this is all scientifically based. This area is an area of active research right now. I have a few papers that you can go look up. These are ones I could actually get off of the internet, so you can go get them too. Here's a paper that was in the Psychological Review in 1993 on the role of deliberate practice in the acquisition of expert performance. So what they do is they watch experts like Michael Jordan, like Ernest Hemingway, these sort of peoples, and what they find is that many characteristics once believed to reflect innate talent are actually a result of intense practice for about 10 years. And if you intensely practice for about 10 years, you're going to put in about 10,000 hours of practice. And only then will you become an expert like a Michael Jordan or like a Yo-Yo Ma. Before that, you're going to be basically one of the rest of us. Here's another paper by actually some of the same authors in the context of business. And what they argue is new research shows that outstanding performance is a product of deliberate practice and coaching, not of talent or skill. Here's another one from the Harvard Business Review written by a coach discussing managing yourself. And what does he say? Compete with yourself, demand relentless feedback, and that is how the best get to be the best and even better. Now you might ask, is this agreed upon by all scientists? And I have to admit, in all honesty, that it is not totally agreed upon by all scientists, but for the following reason. Here's a paper that's just come out on the subject of deliberate practice, and they ask the question, is that all that it takes to become an expert. And what they argue here is that no, that's not all it takes. They might not agree completely with this statement, but they do agree that deliberate practice is an important part, but there is some nature part. There is some innate skills that we do have. So these are some of the scientific papers. You can go find these and read them in detail. But let's just look at what they basically say. They look at this concept of talent. And what is talent? In the dictionary, talent refers to aptitudes or skills that are natural. Those are the things that come to us just basically by birth. So what are some examples of these? There's a lot of examples. One of them could be perfect musical pitch, which occurs in about 1 in 10,000 people. Pretty rare. IQ is an example of an innate talent. They say that the average IQ of a physicist is about 130, and that would be about 2.1% of the population. That would be another natural aptitude. The ability to be very creative and achieve high levels of advanced education. Only 3 people have ever won the fiction Pulitzer Prize twice. And then, of course, there's the obvious one, is physical superiority. For example, how tall you are. The average height in the NBA is about 6'7". And so these are some examples of natural aptitudes and skills. Some of us have these in more or less degree. But what people started asking is this question: what are the variations? Is that all that you need? So here's an example of 2 basketball teams, the Utah Jazz and the Chicago Bulls. And what I plotted here is the number of players on this axis, the y-axis, and then I plotted the height in inches on the x-axis. And remember that the average height of an NBA player is about 79 inches, which is about right here, and that's pretty tall. 6'7" is pretty tall. The players that are out here are incredibly tall. They're approaching about 7 feet tall. But interestingly, there's a large variation. The ones on this end are barely over 6 feet. Sometimes they're not even over 6 feet. There's a very large variation. So saying that being a great basketball player is due to height, certainly that is partly true, but there's a very large variation in heights in NBA basketball teams. And if you look even closer, some people seem to do pretty well without such talents. One Basketball Hall of Fame winner, Calvin Murphy, was actually below the average height of an American, which is about 5'10". If you look at orchestras in the United States, about 30,000 people should have perfect pitch according to that estimate, but there are about 1,200 symphonies in the United States with about 100 members, so there are about 120,000 musicians that play in symphonies around the United States. Clearly, not all of them have perfect pitch, maybe just a few of them. So clearly that's not so important. And one great example of achieving high levels of education, a Hemingway, a Nobel Prize winner for literature, made it through high school, but that was the limit of his education. Of course, some sports are highly selective. If you happen to be a gymnast, your average height is about 5'5", and the height of a male jockey is very short at 5'3". So sports is an example where these innate qualities tend to be more selective, but in many scenarios, they simply don't matter. There's a large variation. Let's look at those Pulitzer Prize winners. Booth Tarkington went to Princeton, 2 honorary degrees from that Ivy League school. John Updike went to Harvard. He became an author. He graduated summa cum laude in English. But the third winner is William Faulkner, who did not go to an Ivy League school and could barely scrape by a grade of a D in English. So there are very large variations. And so what is the common trait that these people tend to have? That's what people wanted to know. So throughout this video, I'll bring in some quotes from some what I think are some very famous and talented people and see what they say. So let's start off with Paul Coffey, who's the Canadian hockey player. And what does he say? Nobody is a natural. You work hard to get good and you work harder to get better. And this is a theme that you see with people who are very good. They work very hard at what they do. They're extremely focused. So what the science says, when you go back to this deliberate practice, is that you need to practice and you need to do it deliberately. So what does that mean? We all know what practice means. It's basically repeated exercise or performance of an activity or skill. Now, if you're like me, I've been typing for many, 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 many years. Too many years that I even want to mention. But I'm terrible at typing. I do it repeatedly, and I simply don't get any better at it. That's where the second part comes in, and that, in a sense, is the more important part. It's the deliberate part of this, is you have to do it consciously and intentionally. You got to pay attention to what you're doing. It's not that you practice, it's how you practice. You have to do it in a fully considered way. You got to pay attention to what you're doing. Don't be impulsive about that. Control your practice, and that is what leads to success. So let's see what Ray Bradbury has to say about that. I know you've heard it 1,000 times before, but it's true. Hard work pays off. If you want to be good, you have to practice, practice, practice. If you don't love something, then don't do it. Another example of someone who achieved greatness, telling us that basically it's hard work and practice, and you better be motivated. What about the rest of us? Now, we may not all want to be gold medalists. A lot of the literature studying deliberate practice studies these people like Yo-Yo Ma or Albert Einstein. We don't necessarily want to be all gold medalists. We might want to be something else. Sports, as I said, clearly favors specific physical traits, but maybe we want to be nurses, engineers, work at the post office, design websites, or be a lawyer. This is where some of these traits don't really matter. This is what actually regular people want to do. We actually might want to be pretty good at several things. Maybe we want to be a good data scientist during the week, a competitive sailor on the weekends, and write short stories later in life. And you want to do all those fairly well. You want to be pretty good at those. Maybe conversely, you want to play bluegrass music, and on the weekends be a database administrator during the week. And on the weekends, when you're not playing bluegrass, you want to be a volunteer. So what we can do is we can look at the science that was done that studies these experts, these really amazing people that have achieved greatness, and apply what they learn, what the scientists learn about watching their behavior, and apply it to ourselves. Okay, so here's what you need to do. This is your step-by-step guide to success. If you follow these steps for whatever it is you want to do, you will get to be very good. So let's go through these very slowly and carefully so that we understand them. So step 1, find something that you are very motivated to do. Do not go past this step until you do. If you're not motivated, the rest of these steps are going to be too hard. So if you're not motivated, figure out why you're not motivated, get motivated. Step 2, practice, obviously. But while you're practicing, you have to do something else. You have to observe what you're doing and watch what's working and watch what is not working. Pay attention to that. Note it in your mind. Okay? Step 3, be proud of the things that are working, but put them behind you. You're going to forget about the things that are working. Get a coach, someone else, to help you with what is not working. You really need to have a coach. You need some independent person that is watching you. And later, this could be you if you get to be very good at this, but early on, I wouldn't recommend it. Just go find an independent person that can help you, to watch you, to help you figure out what is not working. What you're after here is trying to identify the weak link in the chain. This is what you're trying to find. You need to identify it. You need to have a coach identify it, and you need to focus on that weak link. Now, once you've done that, step 5 is design metrics. And what I mean, things you can measure. Design metrics that you can use to measure your progress in a systematic manner. In other words, you'll not be able to progress as quickly and get as good if your judgment of whether you're getting better is, yeah, I think I'm getting better. That's just not good enough. What you need is something usually that's attached to a number. For example, suppose you want to learn to type better. You can watch the frequency of your mistakes. That's a number you can watch, and you can see how it changes day by day and week by week. Or the number of words per minute that you're typing. That's something you can watch every day, watch every week, see if it's changing. Basketball, what percentage of free throws are you missing on Monday? What percentage of free throws did you miss on Tuesday? Write those numbers down. Watch to see how they're changing. You need to have something that you and your coach can actually watch to see if there's progress or not, and if not, figure out why not. Okay, step 6, and this is the very crucial one, is that you want to practice, but you only want to practice those things that will bring improvements. In other words, if you have a nice link up here, it's nice and strong, you have a nice link up here, you have a link here, do not practice those. If you are learning to play guitar and you can play Stairway to Heaven really well, stop doing it. You need to focus on those things that bring improvements. As I said earlier with my example of typing, I type every single day, year after year. I do not get better because I'm not trying to bring improvements. Now keep in mind that the task that you then are left with will be very hard by definition. If it were easy, it would be something that if you practice it, it would bring no benefit to you. So it's not going to be fun. Keep that in mind. It will be hard. These are by definition are the things you're not good at yet. So for example, going back to the example of typing, maybe what you want to do is practice these keys. Maybe that's where your weakness is. Focus on those. I'm just using this as an example, but focus on the things that are rare, that are hard for you, the things that are your bottleneck. Figure out what those are. If you're learning guitar, like I said, don't play Stairway to Heaven over and over again. Go find the very difficult guitar chords, focus on those, have your coach watch you, and see if you're getting better. Okay, final step. Be inventive. Now, what does that mean? What I mean by that is when the scientists observed people that became very, very good at something, what they would do is they would invent ways of practicing. They were very, very specific to them. And remember, all of this is about you. It's not about someone else. You need to figure out what works for you. For example, if you are a football player and you want to be able to outrun somebody and you feel like you're weak on that, maybe you should go run upstairs as fast as you can for an hour every other day. And that is specific to you. That's your goal, that's your weakness, and that is what you need to invent, something like that will get you through. As I said earlier, maybe you're playing, you want to figure out how to type better. Be inventive. What is your weakness? Focus on the things that are specific to you, like maybe you work as an accountant, and there's certain symbols that keep coming up all the time that you need to focus on. Do that. Maybe you're weak with your pinkies. Maybe you should focus on typing using only the letters of your pinkies. Whatever it is that focus on you, invent those things, invent those strategies, invent those ways of practicing that are specific to you. It doesn't matter what works for anybody else. It matters what works for you. And then finally, repeat. Go back up, practice some more, observe what's working and not working again. It will now be different, and then you proceed through these steps again, figure out what you need to do, and repeat. And with that, you will slowly work out all of the things that you're really bad at. You'll spend all of your time focusing on the things that you really need to improve with and get to be really good. Okay. So, one last reminder. If you're enjoying practicing, you're doing something wrong. As I said, these tasks will be hard. So basically, if you want to get good at something, you have to be willing to go through unpleasant practice. It's how you practice, it's not how much you practice. Okay, another quote from somebody who became the United States Secretary of State, Colin Powell. What does he have to say about this? A dream doesn't become a reality through magic. It happens through sweat, determination, and hard work. As you can see, there's a pattern here. These people that have achieved greatness, all of them felt like they didn't get there in some easy way. Another thing that's worth keeping in mind is it's worth getting good at getting good. If you follow those steps, it may be hard for you to follow those steps. It may be that you're not used to following those steps. It may be you're not used to paying attention to what's not working. Practice it with everything you do, and then when you're ready to do something you really want to get good at, you'll be ready and you'll know how to carry out those steps. So think about getting good at getting good. Another quote from a football player. Roger Staubach talks about confidence. How do you get confidence? It's the result of hours and days and weeks and years of constant work and dedication. These quarterbacks don't get where they got because of some innate talent. They worked really hard. Okay, so let's just run through those steps one more time with some quotes just to make sure that you understand them. All right, first, be motivated and be disciplined. If you don't have that, you're not going to be able to put in the time that it takes. Here's a quote from Louis Pasteur on that. Let me tell you the secret that has led me to my goals. My strength lies solely in my tenacity. You got to have tenacity to make this work. Okay, second step. Practice and observe what is not working. There's a quote from the great psychologist Maslow. What is necessary to change a person is to change his awareness of himself. You really have to look at yourself objectively and become aware of what you're doing. And I want to pause right now to talk about something called the Dunning-Kruger effect because it's really important here. And what it says is that people are actually not very good at seeing how good they are. And so here's an example from the Dunning-Kruger effect where you measure someone's performance, and this line right here is their measured performance. And then you ask them to judge that performance. How well do you think that they did? And that actually corresponds to this line up here. So this is the actual performance, and this is what they think is their performance. And what you see is most people overestimate their performance by up to 50%. So keep that in mind, that this applies to all of us. And this is why we need external feedback, coaches. And this is why we need metrics, because science shows that we tend to fool ourselves in exactly what our performance level is. So keep in mind that for all of us, the Dunning-Kruger effect, which is based on scientific research, tells us we're not very good. That's why you need metrics. That's why you need a coach. Okay, obtain measurable feedback. That's part of the metrics. What does Ken have to say about this? Feedback is the breakfast of champions. Okay, identify your weakest performance areas. It's really important to focus on the weakest areas. What does Elon Musk, the famous entrepreneur, have to say about this? I think it's very important to have a feedback loop where you're constantly thinking about what you've done and how you could be doing it better. I think that's the single best piece of advice. Constantly think about how you could be doing things better and questioning yourself. That's from Elon Musk. Okay. Now, be inventive. Last step, here's some advice from Robert Frost. 2 roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and it has made all of the difference. I chose this quote because it represents this idea of being inventive. I took the one less traveled by. That is to say, you need to pick the one that works for you. Just because some way of practicing works for someone else doesn't mean it's going to work for you. If someone practices a certain number of hours, you may have to practice more, you may have to practice less. Take the road less traveled. Okay, so with that, go forth and practice so that it hurts and you will become very good. So what's it going to be for you? 100 hours, 1,000 hours, 10,000 hours? All right, thank you for being here at New Planet School. See you back here soon, I hope.